Alright guys, let's take a look at our homework for 2.3, and I'll go ahead and erase the date for future recordings. Anyway, 2.3 homework, here we go. So we're starting off by looking at just adding and subtracting fractions, mixed numbers, and again the key there is getting common denominators, right? So these first couple, they give us a common denominator. So really it's just 5/4 minus 4/4. We get 1/4 left. We still had the one whole here, right? B, we've got common denominators. So just 7/4 minus 3/4. Well, 7 minus 3 is 4/4, right? So really, you might think about that as 4/4, right? So that's where that came from. So yeah, so 4/4, but that's the same as one whole. You know, and again on this one, 4/12 plus 1 2/3. Well, we gotta get common denominators. And if we can keep the larger number, let's keep it the same. So 4/12. And then 3 times what gets us to that 12? It's gonna be times 4. So I gotta do times 4 up here too. I guess we can keep it with the thickness. So times 4. Top and bottom. So 3 times 4 is 12. Okay. And 2 times 4 is 8. So all we're doing is getting common denominators. 4/12 stayed the same. 2/3 is the same as 8/12. So that's why we're thinking about this is 4/12 plus 1 8/12. Well, we've got the one whole. What's 4 plus 8? That's 12/12. So 1 plus 12/12. But really, 12/12 is one whole, right? So 1 plus 1 gets to 2. Again, just getting common denominators on this stuff, guys. You know, we can keep the 6, right? 3 times 2. So we got to do 2 times 2. We can rewrite both of these as something over 6, right? Now, here's an example where we can't keep the 10, right? So if I double 10 to get 20, hey, 20 works. So can we rewrite these both as something over 20? 10 times 2. Then do the same to the top. And how about 4? 4 times 5. And then we can write our new fractions. We see our final answer is going to be 1/4 in simplest form. Kind of go from there. And again, in this one, we can keep that 60. Yeah, so that's our final answer there. Number 2, show that 3 plus 1/3 plus 1/4 is not equal to 2/7. Why is that? And I just put on here, just remember you have to get common denominators before you can add fractions, and we do not add our denominators. You know, that would work. Or if you want to show me what the answer should be, again, if we get common denominators, so just keep that in mind. 1/3 plus 1/4 is not going to be 2/7. Okay, we don't add our denominators, and we got to make sure they're common before we get started. Dan must do homework for a half hour and then clean his room for a third of an hour before he can go play. What fraction of an hour must he do his homework? Final answer is going to be 5/6. I'll give you that. So we've got 1/2 plus 1/3. Now the problem is I can't add halves and thirds, right? Again, common denominator. So I think we're going to want to get a 6 for a common denominator here, right? 2 times 3 and 3 times 2. Now whatever I do the bottom, you got to do the top, right? So we're going to write equivalent fractions with common denominators, and then we can go from there. Okay, if you need help, just reach out, but I'll get you that far right now. Danielle found a nickel on the playground at school. She also found 20 cents on the sidewalk. How much money did she find in all? Well, what's a nickel plus 20 cents? Think about that. And then what fraction of a dollar did she find? You know, we could write that as whatever she found out of 100. And then you can simplify it from there if you want. But let's start with out of 100 because there's 100 cents, right? 100 pennies in a dollar. Challenge. I did edit a little bit to make it a little easier. Well, we're going to do a re-edit. Apparently the wrong version got pulled up here. So we're going to do a re-edit real quick. And we're going to say this is a half. So there you go, guys. So she's babysitting, and that way I wanted to leave it like this so it would be a little bit easier for you guys. So this is how many hours she worked: 2.5 hours, 3.5, 2.5, and then 3. And then now she does get $6 per hour. So how much money did she earn babysitting last week? Well, first we got to figure out how many hours she babysat, right? So we got 2.5 plus 3.5 plus 2.5 plus 3. So it's going to equal something, right? You're going to figure out what that is. But then she gets $6 per hour. Then we need to multiply that by $6. And that'll tell us the final answer, okay? So figure out how many hours she worked. And then we're going to multiply that by 6. Even if there's a fraction involved, I think we can figure this one out. All right, guys. Next page. We got to color in a fraction of the circles. So to help you, I kind of already put these into groups if you need some help with that. So if I color in half of these circles, I'm going to take all the circles, I put them into 2 equal groups, and I just have to shade in one group out of the 2. So for example, I can do this, and that will be what we need here. KB 1/4. Well, first I put these into 4 groups, and I need to shade in one group, right? One out of the 4 groups. This one, 3 groups out of the 4 groups. 1/6, 2/6, 5/6. The top number tells us how many groups. The bottom number tells us how many groups are all together. So the top number is how many we got to shade in out of the total. Then we take the same number, we cut them into thirds. Okay? Number 2, we're just adding, again, some fractions. Yep, these are all fractions here. I gave you the final answers. And the key, okay, here, I'll give you a little hint on this one, right? 0/3. I know this is kind of a new subject. If I have 0/3, that's just 0. So 0 plus 2/8 is going to be 2/8. So you can have 0 as a numerator. It just means none. 0/3, 0/5, 0/10, doesn't matter. And the rest of these guys, it looks like we can get 12 for a common denominator on B, right? Keep your 6 here. And again, 3 and 4, we're going to get 12. And I did simplify the final answer too, like they did in the book here. If you get 12 for a common denominator, you should get 1 9/12. And then again, in class, we've been talking about simplifying that 9/12. We can divide 9 and 12 by a common factor. Divide these both by 3. 3 goes into 9 3 times, and then 12 divided by 3 is 4. So that's where that 3/4 comes from. Okay? Next page. Marcia walked 1.5 miles to school, and then after school, she walked 3/4 of a mile to her aunt's house. How many miles did she walk in all? So first it says estimate your answer. And again, for me, I like to, kind of my benchmark estimates are either 0, so nothing. We don't hardly have anything. So we're going to say it's about 0, or it's about 1/2. We got half of what we need, or it's close to a whole. So it's either going to be 0, half, or whole, or a variation of that. So 1.5, I'm going to leave as 1.5. Because I can either say just 1, 1.5, or 2. But I'll leave 1.5 as 1.5. And then how about 3/4? Well, 3/4 is more than a half, so if it's more than a half, I'm going to say it's a little closer to another whole. So I'm going to say it's about 1.5 plus 1. So my estimate is going to be about 2.5 miles. Okay, that's my estimate. And again, my benchmarks are either 0, half, or whole, and then whatever the whole number is if it's a mixed number. And then to find the exact answer, yep, we're just adding 1.5 plus 3/4. And again, we can even start setting this one up. Can we keep that 3/4? Yeah. Let's keep 3/4 alone. Let's not change that if we don't have to, because 2 times 2 is 4, and then I have to do 1 times 2 up top. So we got 1 and 2/4. Because 1/2 we can think of as 2/4. So then we just add it from here. And you'll notice, actually I didn't put the answer on this one yet. Let me see. Get back to where I was on my answer key. The final answer, yep, I'll put the final answer on this one, is 2 and 1/4. 2 1/4 miles. So, kind of got you there most of the way, and then figure out how to get to the final answer there. Francisco and his mom got some fruit from the fruit stand yesterday. They bought 2.5 pounds of peaches, 7/8 pound of raspberries, and 1 1/4 pounds of apricots. How many pounds did they buy in all? So we're going to estimate. Again, I'm going to stick with my either a 0, half, or a whole. So 2.5, I'm just going to leave it as 2.5. Now 7/8, that's really close to 1 whole, isn't it? So I'm going to say that's 1 whole. That's about a whole. And then 1 and 1/4. Well, we got the 1 whole. But that 1/4, I'm going to say that's not really much, so I'm not even going to include that 1/4. So that's what I'm going to use for my estimate. 2.5 plus 1 plus 1, well, 2, 3, 4. So my estimate is going to be 4.5, about 4.5 pounds. That's my estimate. Now let's find the exact answer. Well, we're just going to add our 3 fractions or mixed numbers here. So we got 2.5 plus 7/8 plus 1 1/4. Now we'll take the largest denominator, which is 8 in this case, and can we keep it? Yeah, 2 times something is 8, and 4 times something is 8. So, cool. So with 7/8, I don't need to rewrite it all, do I? But the 4 is going to be 4 times 2, and I got to do 1 times 2. So 1 and something over 8, and then 2 times 4, and 1 times 4, right? So I got my 2 whole. We're rewriting this as something over 8. Looks like 1 times 4 is 4. 1 times 2 is 2, and go from there. Now the final answer is 4 and 5/8 pounds. And just kind of work it from there. Now instead of another couple challenging ones, I just wanted to work on some more division here. So again, your hint is there are no remainders. So, well, I'll actually type that real quick. Actually, I'll just do it down here. Yep, there are no remainders. Okay, so that's your hint on these. So if you got a remainder, you made a mistake somewhere. Okay, so there are no remainders on these. And again, in class we've been talking, we started originally with start with 10 if you can. So we got to see how many times 5 goes into 895. So start with 10 if you can. 10 times 5 is 50. Well, we got way more than 50, so we've extended that a little bit. How about 100? Yeah, so we can start with 100 groups of 5, right? So we could do 100 groups of 5. 100 times 5 is 500. So we get a 5, a 9, and a 3. Cool. So now we can see how many times 5 goes into 395. And go from there, okay, guys? So just keep practicing. And again, there are no remainders on these. Then we get to some ratio tables. We've got an example right here. Again, what we need to do is solve 23 times 26. We're going to start by saying, well, what's one group of 23? Well, 23, right? All these are going to start with just one group of that number. So I can double it. That gives me 46. You know, I can double that to get to 92. Another easy one is tens. 10 times 23 is just going to be placing a 0, so 230, right? Then I can double that. To get to, in this case, 460. And then to get to 26, oh, I could add 2 plus 4. That gets me the 6. So again, you can use, well, some of these you do need to fill out. One of them you can set up however you want. So again, one group of 35, that's just 35. Two groups of 35, if I double that, that's going to be 70. So I just doubled it. And then I can double it again to get four groups. So if I double 70, that's 140. Okay. How about 40 groups? Well, we'll write some notes on these. So we started by doubling. And then we doubled again, right? But now to go from 4 to 40, we multiplied by 10. Then whatever we do on the top, we got to do the bottom, right? So we doubled 35 to get 70. We doubled 70 to get 140. And now we're saying times by 10. That's going to be 140 with a 0 behind it, or 1,400. So we know that 40 of them are that much, and then we already knew what 4 was, so we can just add these up, right? The 1,400 plus the 140, 0, 4, 5, and 1. So we got 1,540. So that's what we're thinking on that one. So again, just use what we know, to start, and then move along. On this ratio table, again, one group of 39 is just 39. So I can double it, times 2. And I got to do the same to the bottom. Again, these are a lot like fractions, right? So times 2. And then I go from 2 to 20. What do I multiply by? Times 10. So whatever I had here, I just multiply times 10. So I'll let you guys fill in the numbers. But that's the idea there, right? How about this one? One group of 65 is 65. So we can double that to get two groups, to figure out how much two groups of 65 would be. So just double that. And then go from 2 to 20. What did we do? Well, we had to multiply by 10. And then this one's going to be a little bit different. We got to end with 18. Well, whatever we got for 20, we're going to subtract a group of 2, and that'll leave us with 18. Okay? And now D, you got to do 4 times 18. So we need 4 groups of 18. Well, one group of 18 is just going to be 18, obviously. And then we got to end with, what would 4 groups of 18 be? Now you can set this up however you want. We just know at the end we got to get to 4. I'd say maybe double it, right? That's going to be 2 groups of 18. Then if I double that 2, that gives me 4 groups. So maybe I don't even need this last box. We're kind of done. So you can set these up however you want, but just start with the numbers and manipulate them from there. And then the last one, our end goal is 15 groups, 75 groups times 15. So one group of 15 is 15, and kind of work from there. If we do 100, we'll multiply by 100. Right? Multiply by 100. Then 50, what did we do? To go from 100 to 50, we divided by 2. So just cut that in half. Then to go to 25, guess what? You're going to cut it in half again. So once we have one number on here, we can start playing around with it. And then you get 75. Oh, look at 50 plus 25 is going to be that 75, right? So So whatever your number. Okay? All right, true or false? I want you guys to explain your answers on this. I'll tell you the answers. This one, it turns out they're both true. But I need you to explain. Explain your answers. How do you know it's true or false, right? Well, let's see, 98 times 34. 98 is pretty close to 100, right? So I can do the over strategy, go 100 groups of 34, and then just take away those two groups that I went over, okay? How about 46 times 24? Is that the same as 23 times 56? Looks like maybe they're doubling and halving here, right? 46 times 28. Well, if I cut 46 in half, so if I double in half, half of 46 is 23. And then if I double 28, that gets us to 56. So yeah, so we can use that double and half strategy. Double one number, cut the other in half, and we'd get an equivalent expression. All right, Veronica has to multiply 398 times 18. She says she can do 400 times 18 and then take away one group of 18. So this is very similar to letter A here. We can use an over strategy. Isn't 400 really close to 398? It sure is. But if I'm at 398, how many groups do I need to take away? Oh, that 398, I went over two groups of 18. She said only take away one group. You got to take away two groups on that one, right? So, is she right? No, she's not quite right on that. And why is it? Because she only took away one group. So what does she need to do? She needs to take away two groups. So we can go with that 400. That's a good strategy. 400 times 18. But then we got to take away. Oh, here's what she was thinking. 400 times 18 minus 18. She only took away one group. What we actually need to do is 400 times 18 minus two groups of 14. Or two groups of 18, right? Because we went over by two groups. So then we're good. That works. And then you can solve it from there. And then, hey, we're done. And then again, just a few more division. Again, there are no remainders on these, just like before. So again, there are no remainders. There are no remainders. So, as always, guys, if you need help on anything, let me know. But we're just cruising on through Unit 2.